And we are recording with the one and only Mr. Michael Vecchione, who's been on here. I'm going through all the old Spotify episodes. I gotta like update some stuff. Whenever I have to like update something, for the whole library, or if I find a new website where I can upload all the episodes to, it's just a
Yeah,
total undertaking because it's 1,200 episodes now. So I always, whether I'm uploading to something new or I'm going back and adding like a new, join the Patreon link to everything, I break it down into bite size. I'm like, just do 10 a day, and it takes like 12, it takes like 120 days. But I always, whenever this happens, it happens like once or twice a year, just whatever. And
right.
it's always, I always do kind of enjoy the journey because I end up going back and looking at every single episode, seeing the thumbnail, seeing how it's progressed. And it often leads me to like inviting old guests on who I haven't talked to in a while. But it also shows me kind of like it's like going into the Old Testament of the podcast. And I do remember, and I start to see who are like the original people. And I don't think it was even your first episode, but I was looking through it and you were episode 260. And this is episode 1268. So that was over 1,000 episodes ago. So for everybody listening,
Wow.
Mike's one of the founding fathers, whatever that's worth. I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but you're one of the OGs. Yeah.
Thank
So
you, thank you, thank you. It's a pleasure and it's an honor. So,
thank you, sir.
um, happy to have you. Happy to be back, and it's been a little while, but but it's good to be here. So,
Beautiful.
and of course, thank you again for having me. It's nice to have an outlet when you're trying to sell books.
Hmm.
It's terrific to have somebody like yourself, give me the opportunity to talk about the books, and hopefully it spurs sales, which is important. But they're
And
not. It wouldn't be sales. The sales would be well worthwhile to your listeners and to your viewers,
and
because I think, quite frankly, I know they're my books, but I think they're pretty good.
and
So
I'll plug, and anyone that knows that the anyone remotely familiar knows the podcast is that the highest compliment I can ever give anyone is having them on the podcast, and the next highest compliment is having them on again, because it's a one man show. And if I have someone on for a book, let alone repeated times, that is, don't listen to my words, look at my actions. I've had Mike on here who knows how many times. And I think this is the third or fourth episode for this book, and it's a book I have plugged for you. I don't get a penny from anything. Doesn't matter. It's Fallen Angel. And it just yesterday I was talking to a nice woman, Holly Renee, and I actually kind of tied in Fallen Angel, and like the idea of visualizing either the thing you want to be or the thing you don't want to be. And to me, today, have a little anxiety just hit me in the morning. Went to the gym, and I always try to take an abstract idea or feeling like anxiety, and I try to anthropomorphize it. I see it as a person. I see it as a bully. I see it as someone trying to bring me down. And I'm like, fuck that person. And it helps. It legitimately does. And
good,
why I
good.
like Fallen Angel is because it is the encapsulation of the human condition and the more dark elements of it. And is there a common thread in these? And that's what Mike did. He took real world experience, real shit. This is real shit, and tied in, really, I mean, you anthropomorphized a demonic, well, not a demonic figure, the demonic
The
figure,
demonic
Satan.
figure. Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
what the book is. So with that, I'm going to shut up and let Mike, I'm going to let you take it away and take it in any direction you'd like.
Good. Well, just to bring people up to date, and also to educate people who may have not heard about Fallen Angel before. You're correct. The book, everything in the book, and in book two, which will be out probably in September, and hopefully in book three, which will be out next year sometime. The Every crime that I discuss, or every crime that the prosecutor in the case in the books fights, and tries to bring justice for, were real cases. They were all mine, and that's kind of the genesis of the story of the books to begin with. I had all of these cases, and I was a prosecutor for a very long time, for over 30 years, and I was a defense attorney for about 10 or 12. So I have done a lot in terms of investigations and representing people, and trying cases, and I've done, as you well know, before Fallen Angel, I had done 4 books, and they were all true crime books based on cases that I did. except for one. One was a book that was written about an agent for the Veterans Administration, federal government inspector general, and it was a book about doctors and nurses who were killing people, and he was the investigator. But other than that book, by the way, the name is Behind the Murder
Yeah,
Curtain.
with Bruce
Other,
Saxon. That's how
yeah,
I got in touch with you.
that's
Is
how
through
you got to
Bruce.
know me. Yep.
Yeah.
And other than that book, the others are all about my cases and about instances in my life that that I thought your people would be interested in. I mean, they watch television, and true crime and movies, and true crime is a big genre for people. Well, those books were true crime books. Then I had a point where I had dozens of stories, and my idea was to write an anthology, kind of a compilation of each of the stories. So it would be a book of short stories. Until I started talking to the book agents that I had been dealing with, and they said to me essentially, Mike, people who are fans of this genre don't want short stories; they want beginning, middle, and end. And while you could do that with a short story, he's talking about expanded beginning, middle, and end. So he said, if you find a way to tie all of those cases together with a common thread, then you were talking about something. And I had this old idea from a while back. My shouldn't say ex, my former writing partner, who's now deceased, Jerry Schmetterer, and I had always talked about this this idea of having the ultimate evil come to Brooklyn. I mean, he was the spokesperson for the district attorney. I was in charge of homicide, then rackets, and you deal with evil all the time. And we said, what if we were to expand on this and kind of put the prosecutor, a prosecutor, into the middle of a battle between the ultimate evil, the devil, and society in general, and how would that work? And I said, well, I think that we could do that because I've got all these cases. It kind of just it languished for a while, and we didn't do it. And then he passed away, and I had an idea to revive this. And as I said, I spoke to these book agents. They told me, yeah, you could do it, tie them together, and I did. I spoke to a publisher, owner of a publishing company out here on Long Island, who I had done some publicity with for the other books, and I gave her a call, and I said, listen, here's my idea. What do you think? She said, well, I like it, but send me something. Send me a proposal, and I'll run it past my people. Well, it didn't take very long, Tom. I got a call back from her, and she said to me, not only do I love it, but my editors love it. They said, and we love it so much, I'm about to offer you a contract to do 3 books in this series, and it was great. And Fallen Angel, the book we're about to talk about, is book 1. The second book, I'm going to give you a little preview. It's also called Fallen Angel, but the subtitle is The Battle for the Soul of Brooklyn. And the concept is that Satan has, over the course of centuries, kind of made a visit to various locations throughout the world, and he has instigated and fomented chaos with these horrific crimes, that some of which were solved, and others, because of him, were not solved. And when they were solved, there were also situations where he would instigate, he would get himself involved, and witnesses would disappear, and evidence would disappear, etc. So the book starts with a priest in the Vatican's office of exorcisms, who had been doing research because he was familiar, obviously, with Satan and Satan's ways, and saw that there was an uptick in crimes of horrific kinds of crimes in Brooklyn, New York. And obviously it was set in Brooklyn because that's where all my cases come from. And he recognized and did some research and found that after these crimes were done and committed, and people were generally acquitted because of strange things happening during the course of investigations or during the trial, he recognized that there were exorcisms that were done on these defendants after the crimes and after they had been acquitted, and it was an uptick on them in Brooklyn. And he understood that what was happening is that these guys or women who were put into this position of committing these crimes by the devil recognized that that was not them, that something possessed them and made them do this stuff. And he brought it to his boss, so to speak, the cardinal in charge of the Vatican's Office of Exorcisms, and made a case. And they said, he said that you've got something here. They went to the Pope. Now, this is, of course, fictionalized, but they went to the Pope, and the Pope recognized that they were onto something and said, call the United States, speak to the president. And he called and set up a meeting with the Attorney General, and the cardinal and the priest came over to the United States and made their case. And the people here in America recognized that there was something to this. And they created a special task force, secret special task force of clerics, lawyers, investigators, who would be the people to watch for this I guess pattern to develop. And when it did, go to that particular city in the United States and attack it. And they came to Brooklyn, and it was necessary to find a prosecutor in Brooklyn to handle these cases. And they recruited a guy from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office who happened to be the chief of the rackets division in the Brooklyn DA's office. Now, why him? Well, he was kind of at the low point of his professional career because he had convicted a corrupt federal agent, and instead of being afforded accolades for bringing to justice somebody who was betraying his badge, etc., and betraying the trust of the people, he was made a pariah. Law enforcement went the other way and said, "You convicted one of our own, so you know what? Fuck you. We don't like you anymore." So he was stuck, and he was again had to kind of find something that was going to bring him back to the favor that he was enjoying, because he was a very successful prosecutor. And he found this case, and it's the case number one in the book, which involved the death of a young woman who was killed completely at random on her way home from her job, which was to care for women in a battered woman's home. And she, when she was killed, mercilessly killed on the street for what was supposed to be at least portrayed, at least kind of set up by the devil to be a purse snatch. The newspapers, because of the randomness of it, the newspapers called her an angel. She came from another city. She came to work with battered women in New York, and she wanted to be. She was in Columbia University to get her master's degree in social work. And the mayor said, it was in the book, of course, but in real life as well, because it's based on a true story, that we lost an angel last night. Now that kind of got Michael's attention. And it also got his attention that the murder had occurred on a block that was actually near where he grew up. He used to play stickball on the block, and had friends there. So he takes the case, and he figures this is going to be the case that's going to get me back into the good graces when I win this thing. And it was not the greatest case, but it was okay. The detective on the case was a guy that Michael knew, and to cut to the chase, he wins. And he thinks that, okay, now I'm back. Turns out, no. The memory was long on the part of these people in his office and law enforcement, and they tell him basically they still treat him like crap. So one day, as he's walking home after this win, he meets a priest who happens to be standing on the steps of his home, and he recruits Michael. He tells him, come to talk to someone. It's important that you talk to them. And Michael knew this priest. He was a Monsignor who he grew up with. And they talk, and he meets the head of this task force. And the task force, the head tells him, we've been watching you because we have this. They explain what I just explained. And that case that you had, that case was, the devil was at the center of it. He's the guy that instigated the crime. And in the story and in the book, there are things that happen and don't happen that kind of tell the reader that something's strange here. And at the end of the case, you realize that it was Satan who set this whole thing up and put roadblocks in Michael's way to Michael is the prosecutor's first name. And he's able to overcome them. And that kind of impressed the people who were in charge of this organization. And they now told him that we're working for us. So Michael's off on a brand new adventure, and he's got one problem, is that he's against the ultimate evil in the world. And one of the things that he's told is that Satan does not like to lose. So there is a risk with you taking these cases. He may not and probably will not go after you directly because he wants to play with you. He wants to humiliate you. He wants to have you lose and become, someone who's laughed at. But be careful, because he may come after people who you trust, people who you love, and people who are instrumental in achieving what it is that you want to achieve, which is a conviction, and put the bad guy behind bars. Now, that's what the book is about.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about is part two, because it kind of hits home with what I've just said. Part two is based on a case, once again, that I handled. It was the murder of an off-duty police officer on July 4th. And the reason that it made, in addition to him being a police officer, that it made headlines in Brooklyn and across the city, was that he was an African-American kid who grew up in the middle of the New York City Housing Authority projects in one of the worst areas of Brooklyn. And those projects and those housing complexes are not, they're not made up necessarily of people who love the police. But this particular cop in real life and in my book grew up admiring the police officers who patrolled the housing project. In fact, one particular guy used to stand outside this kid's home, his building, I should say, every day. And when he would come home from school, they'd have a chat. The kid realized, the soon-to-be cop realized that this guy was protecting me, protecting my mother and father and my family and the people who live in this building. And he's made up his mind that he was going to be a cop himself. And he does, and he becomes a police officer. And when he graduates from the police academy, he requests his assignment to be back in those housing projects. Nobody would volunteer for that. In fact, most of the time when people were assigned to those projects, they bitched and moaned because they didn't want to have to face the people who were living there. And the housing projects, I don't know if you've ever been in one, but I have as a prosecutor. They're not very nice places. But this guy, and in the book I call him Robbie, which isn't his real name. But so Robbie in real life and Robbie in the book begins to work in one of the worst housing projects in the city, called the Pink Houses. It's named after some guy named Pink. I don't remember exactly what the name is based on, except it's a person. And he has now become the idol and of all of the people who work there, live there, particularly the elderly people, who he makes sure he's out and about and protects them from the bad guys, the drug dealers and the muggers and the robbers, and they love him. He's one of their own who has come back to protect them, and in real life that's the case as well. July 4th. He had just purchased, in real life and in the book, a brand new motorcycle, shiny, brand new motorcycle. And he has a girlfriend who lives in the projects with him, and he picks her up, and they're going to Manhattan to a club. But before they do that, they pull up to a grocery store in the neighborhood. The girl goes inside. His girlfriend goes into the store to buy whatever she's going to buy. And in real life, Robbie is sitting on the bike. He's got a helmet on, but nobody knows he's a cop. Takes the helmet off. He's waiting for her. And a guy comes across the street from where the bike is parked and pulls a gun and says to Robbie, get off the motorcycle. I want you. And Robbie says, wait a second. I'm a cop. You're not going to rob me. This is real life and in the book. And the guy panics and goes crazy and shoots Robbie in the head. Just shoots him.
Just execution. Yeah.
Yep. And what happens is Robbie goes down. The motorcycle falls on top of him. And the guy then goes up to the motorcycle and grabs it and tries to lift it off the body. He can't do it. And there's people around. There are a lot of people. It's July 4th evening. It's the night, and people are around and out and about. And he now takes off. He panics and takes off and runs. Okay. In the book, the next day, and I'll tell you the motivation for the robbery in a second. In the book, the next day, Michael is called to the scene, and he's told about the murder by the Monsignor, who's now his liaison to the secret group, who had gotten a call from the head of the group saying that, I believe that this is our man, that this is Satan's behind this. It's a cop. And there were certain other things that happened during the course of this that told them that they thought, but they weren't sure. And they want Michael to go to the scene, and they want him to sniff around. They want him to ask around. And when he gets there, in the book, there is a riot almost going on. Everybody is out and about, and they're screaming for the cops. They're screaming for the cops to be brought to justice. And Michael has no idea what they're talking about. The cops, what are you saying? Well, apparently there's a rabble-rouser in the crowd who I describe as someone with these red dreadlocks, with this skewed up face, etc. And he is telling people in the crowd that it was a plainclothes unit of cops who went and hassled the black cop and wound up killing him. And now they want us to believe that it was a robber, and he's robber, and there's almost a riot time. And Michael now goes up to the head, the lieutenant on the scene, and says to him, listen, let me go talk to these people. Let me tell them, let me set the record straight. And he walks over and his intention is to talk to the rabble rouser. But when he gets to the crowd, he looks around, and this big mouth is nowhere to be found. And he's now questioning, and he makes his speech anyway. And he grabs, and a couple of the men in the crowd come over to him and say, Mr. Gioca, thank you for, that's his last name, Michael Gioca. Thank you for what you said. The guy who was creating all of the citizen, the guy who lived he said, listen, I've lived here for a long time. I know all these people out on the street here. I never saw that guy ever before. I don't know who he is. And he just disappeared. Well, as you read the book, you get the understanding that this is Satan. He's creating this thing. Now, the robbery. How does Satan get into this? In real life, the robber has come back from Baltimore, Maryland. He went down to Baltimore to visit his girlfriend's friend, and there's a party, and they buy some drugs, and instead of getting to the party with the drugs, they get stopped by undercover police officers in Baltimore and get arrested. He's got cash on him, his girlfriend doesn't. So he's able to post bail for himself. He tells her, don't worry about it. I'm going to go back to Brooklyn. I'll get the money, come back and bail you out. Okay. In the book, same thing. The problem is that the shooter, the soon to be shooter, is having no luck raising this money. He tries to rob people on the street. Nobody has. I mean, he's not robbing people in the upper East Side of Manhattan where people have money. He's trying to rob people who live in a poor neighborhood in Brooklyn. Of course, they're not going to have anything. And he wants to now rob the store that Robbie and his girlfriend had parked in front of, until he went over to it and saw that earlier and saw that it had plexiglass inside. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't rob the store. So in the book, he's sitting on the curb lamenting his inability to raise money for his girlfriend when he's approached by someone who introduces himself as a guy named Jiz, Jiz. Sits next to him, and he sits down just after Robbie and his girlfriend rolled up with their motorcycle. And Jiz says to the soon-to-be shooter, "Nice bike, huh? Guy must have money." And he starts talking to him and essentially tells him, "That's your out. You looking for money? That's your out. That's where you go. Rob that bike, rob him. He must have money, etc." Now, I describe who he is, and this is not a secret. Anybody who gets the book, they'll know right away that I have made these characters, this guy Jiz is clearly Satan again. But in order for the reader to figure out who he is, I always talk about a description. What did he look like? And I have him, each time Satan appears as a human in the book and in the stories, he has the mark, what I call, particularly at the end of book or in book 2, as the mark of the devil. He's got this screwed up mole kind of growth on the left side of his face. And this guy Jiz gets the shooter to go across the street and do what he did. Shot and killed this hero to everybody in the neighborhood. Now the police do an investigation, and they come up with 3 eyewitnesses. And in real life, I got to tell you, Tom, this is what happened. They come up with 3 eyewitnesses, and each of them, although they didn't know who the shooter was by name, they kind of knew that he hung around the neighborhood. They recognized him. And to make a very long story short, by the time Mike Vecchione, gets involved in the case, the three individuals, the 3 witnesses, are brought to police precinct, and they give statements in which they lay out what happened. And in the book, of course, they don't say anything about the police, plainclothes police doing it. They all are stand-up people, and they say, no. The guy it was some guy who robbed them, and that's what this is all about. So in real life, they tell me, after the police question him, I go out and question them, and they tell me what they saw. And they saw essentially what I just told you. Now, the question is, how do we get this guy? How do they finally get him? Well, in the real life and in the book, the police ask around, and finally someone gives them a tip that it might be, and they give the name. Now, again, I'm shortening this. There's a lot to these stories, but I can't do that in the short period of time that we had. They ultimately bring in this particular individual, the shooter, and the 3 eyewitnesses pick him out at a lineup. So the cops know, man, we think we got the right guy here. And they do. They do have the right guy. That same day, they call me to the precinct, me, Vecchione, and also in the book, they call Gioca, the potential shooter. The police have already questioned them, and for lots of reasons. And I think he ultimately realized he screwed up big time. He confesses. He confesses to everything. And he confessed to me in the precinct the day. And I and Michael Gioca take a very, very big chance in asking a series of questions about the gun. The gun has never been recovered, and wasn't recovered when I got involved and when Gioca gets involved. And the question I had for him, and Gioca has, is, where'd the gun come from? Well, he answers. And he says, I got it from a guy on the street. The most important question is, where is it now?
Yeah.
And he again says, I'll tell you. And he tells me in real life, and he tells Gioka that what happened after the shooting, he ran to his mother's house, apartment building. He knew the guy downstairs from his mother, who lived downstairs from his mother, and he brought the gun to him and asked him to hide it. And he says, it's there. It's still there. Now, question is, are we going to get it, or has the guy gotten rid of it? And the police in real life and in the book go out to this place and they get the gun. Now they bring it back to the precinct, and the guy is still there with me, and I'm still waiting. And I say to myself, I can seal this case with a series of couple of questions. And Gioka, of course, agrees with me because he look and he says to himself, I'm going to show him the gun, and I'm going to have him identify it if he'll do it. Now that is a risk, Tom. And when I started to ask the questions in real life, I looked at the detective who was in the room with me, and he was like, are you kidding? If this guy says no, that's not the gun, we've just undone everything that you did. Yeah. So Gioka, the detective, I think in the book, I don't remember if he calls Michael outside, but he's like holding his breath. And in real life and in the book, I show him the gun. And God was on my side, I have to say. And he was clearly on Gioka's side because the shooter identifies the gun. Said, yeah, that's the gun. That's the gun I used. And we now have, I believe, one of the most solid cases that I've ever had as a prosecutor, and Gioka thinks the same way. Now, what else do I have? So I have 3 eyewitnesses. I have the confession. I have the gun. I got him identifying the gun, but there's more. Remember, I told you that after the shooting, the motorcycle fell on top of the victim, the cop, and the bad guy went over, grabbed it to lift it up so he could steal it. So the witnesses told that to the detectives, and they told it to me. So I said, well, did you dust the car, the thing? And they said, yeah, we did. And sure enough, they get a palm print, they get fingerprints, they put them into the computer. Whose prints are they? The shooter. So now, I mean, think about this case. I have the guy touching the actual subject of the theft, the motorcycle. I have the gun. I have and the person who we got the gun from came in and told us that the shooter brought it to him and told him to hide it. 3 eyewitnesses. And by the way, the deceased in real life, as I said, Robbie, was an African American. The shooter, African American. All of the witnesses, African American. The guy whose apartment the gun was found in, African American. Okay, so there's not a single racial aspect to this case at all. No one, if they look at it, is going to say, well, you had 3 eyewitnesses who were white. Of course, they hate black people, which is what you have to think of when you're a prosecutor in the real world. So Gioka has the strongest case you could possibly have, right? And so does Vecchione. So we go to trial. And jury selection in Brooklyn means that you're going to get potential jurors that are more than likely 65 to 70% minorities. Mm-hmm. Okay. And which we did. We had a jury of, I would say, probably of the 12, we probably had 8 African Americans. You may have had a Hispanic and a couple of whites. And and Gioka lays this case out. Okay, lays the whole thing out. It all goes spectacularly well. Now, in the book, during some of the preparation for the trial, I've also inserted, as the writer, some things that the devil has done to undermine the case, etc. And you'll have to have your listeners have to buy the book in order to find out what I'm talking about.
Go support Mike. Buy the book.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. In real life, I pick a jury, and in the book, Gioka picks a jury, and it's a great jury, I think. I remember distinctly that the last 2 jurors, numbers 11 and 12, when we were about to select them, and jury selection is a misnomer. You don't select people. What you do is you reject people and hope that the people that you keep are people who are good for your case on both sides. So you interview a series of 12. The prosecution gets 20 challenges to knock out the people he or she doesn't like. The defense gets 20 challenges to knock out people he or she doesn't like until you get a jury. Okay. So when people say it's jury selection, it's really jury rejection, because you're the people that you have that are left are people who weren't rejected, so to speak. Okay. So the last two jurors who were ready to sit were both young African-American women. And when I say young, I'm talking about 30, 35, not teenagers. But I have a defendant who is Black, but I have a victim who is an African-American hero, a young guy who's in his late 20s, who essentially assigned himself to work in the projects. And Gioka, in his thinking in the book, says, I got no problem with these two. There's no problem at all, you know. So he was running out of challenges anyway. I kept them, he keeps them. The trial goes on and all the evidence goes in. Now, in the book, not in real life, in the book, I would say maybe the next, not the last day, but towards the end of the trial, a court officer happens to be out in front of the courthouse on the lunch break. And he sees the two jurors, 11 and 12, become engaged in conversation with a woman who's pushing a baby carriage. And he's thought it was curious, so he kind of stood there and watched, and away from them. They didn't see him. He was away from them. And he sees that they're laughing and joking, and he says, you know, these people know each other, and it's a baby, etc. And when the lunch break is over, the two jurors have to go back to the courthouse. This woman with the baby carriage kind of passes by him. He gets somewhat of a look at her, and there's nothing that he thinks is suspicious at all. So he doesn't bring it to anyone's attention. He doesn't tell the judge. He doesn't think anything of it. It's just three people talking on the street. One happened to have a baby, you know, and they're talking, and they were, you know, looking at the baby and playing with it, etc. So the case gets to the point of summations. And by the way, the real cop's family is in the audience when I did it, and in the book, the mother, father, and brother are sitting in the first row of the courtroom, and they're listening to summations. Right? Summations are over. I remember, and Gioka plays up the idea that Robbie is a hero. He came back to protect his own. He didn't forget what he learned when he was a kid about the cops, and he wanted to make life better for the people who lived in these housing projects, and everybody loved him. And of course, I did the same thing. So jury goes out to deliberate, and one day passes, no verdict. 2 day passes, no verdict. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm going to step out of the Gioka persona and go into the Vecchione persona. When this was happening, Tom, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I said, this is the best case I've ever had in terms of the quality and quantity of evidence.
Airtight.
It was absolutely. And, you know, you never say something is airtight, because
Really jinx it, yeah.
But this is as close to being airtight as possible. And I got to tell you something. Well, I don't want to spoil. Let me finish the story. So Gioka is in the same position. And every time, you know, they have questions, the jurors, so the judge asks everybody back into the courtroom. They read evidence back. They do all kinds of he answers legal questions. And every time Gioka and Vecchione walk into the courtroom, there were Robbie's family sitting there, and there's no verdict. Finally, after I don't know how many days, I just don't remember, they get a note. The judge gets a note saying that they are hopelessly deadlocked, the jury. They can't arrive at a decision. So the Gioca judge sends them back. The Vecchione judge sends them back and says, keep working. You know, you got it. We're trying to resolve this. Again, I'll make a long story short. Another note, hopelessly deadlocked. Another note. Finally, the judge, in my case and also in the Gioca case, says, I can't, there's nothing I can do. We can't, they're going to have to declare a mistrial. And I remember in real life and also in the book, the judge is as shocked as I was. Of course, the defense attorney is happy as hell because he only needs one person to say not guilty and there's a hung jury and he got it. So he doesn't know what the reason is. Neither does Gioca, neither does Vecchione. So after the judge releases the jury, after he releases the jury, he says to he turns to Gioca and he had turned to me, and he said, shaking his head like, I'm puzzled by this whole thing. I can't imagine what happened. He said, and he was candid with the defense attorney. In real, this is one of the strongest cases I've ever seen. So he says to Gioca, and he says to me, when can you try? The answer is tomorrow. The defense attorney is like, no, I need some time, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, puts it off for 2 weeks. So in the book and in real life, I go to the jury room and Gioca goes to the jury room to find out what's going on. Well, the jurors were still there. And jurors 11 and 12, the two African-American women, were sitting in a corner. The rest of the jurors were getting their stuff together and they talked to me. The foreperson and someone else on the jury, not white people, but other black people. The foreperson was black. One of the other jurors was black. And I said, what, tell me what happened. And the foreperson looks over at those two in the corner and he goes, he says to Gioca and said to me, he moves his head like, them. I said, what are you talking about? Apparently, what they said to the other jurors was, we don't care what the evidence is. We don't care how strong it is. This is what he quoted and one of them saying, we ain't putting another young black man in jail.
Yeah.
No matter how much how guilty he is. We ain't putting him in jail.
Even though the black man killed a black man, that's,
Yeah. So in the book, of course, the person who put in their head that they shouldn't convict them was the woman who was talking to them with the baby. And how do we know that? Because the court officer, after he's standing there with Gioca while he's talking and they find out it's these two, after the jury leaves, he goes up to Gioca and says to him, I got to tell you something, which I never told anybody before. He tells him about what he saw. And Gioca now says to him, did you get a look at this woman? He goes, yeah, she passed me. I can't identify her, but she did have something that if I saw it again, I'd recognize it to be her. Guess what she has? The mark on the left cheek. So Gioca knows exactly what happened.
Yeah.
In real life, of course, that's not the case. In real life, I tried the case again in 2 weeks. 15 minutes, the jury was out.
Yeah.
With a conviction. I got a conviction in 15 minutes. In the book, I have to change the idea. And what I did was I had Gioca go back to the judge with the court officer and the defense attorney and tell the judge exactly what he saw on the street. And in the book, Gioca says, Your Honor, I believe there's jury tampering. I don't know who this woman is, but I believe that's what happened. And he agrees, the judge. Why in the book he agrees? Because he knows that the case was so strong, something had to happen.
Yeah.
Gioca asks him to try, when they try the case again, to sequester the jury, keep them under guard. They were never out on the street, always with court officers around them, and he agrees to do it. And of course, In the book, the new jury, the foreperson, is an African-American woman about the same age as Robbie's mom, who was sitting in the first row for the entire trial. And when the verdict was announced, the foreperson stood up, looked over at Mrs. Robbie's mother. I forgot what her last name was in the book. Smiles when she answers the question, how do you find? And she looks at her and says, we find him guilty, with this big smile on her face. Well, that was, everybody was happy. Mrs. Robbie's mom and brother and father are hugging Michael, and they, because he was candid with them. He told them what was going on. And that seemed in the book, that is, I give the impression that that's the end, right? But remember what I told you before, what he was cautioned about in terms of revenge being extracted. So what happens? He's dressed the next morning. He's about to go out, and I think going to his sister's daughter's. And this is one of the things that the devil did. His sister in the book, Michael's sister, is adopting a baby from Korea, and Michael, and she's out and about. She's at JFK Airport, and something happens in the book in which they believe that the baby is not coming. So, but the baby ultimately does come. And Michael is the godfather, so he's getting ready to go to the christening the next day, and he's got the radio on. TV on, and the news says that there was this tragedy. Someone was killed, pushed in front of a subway train, and died. And he gets a phone call, and he finds out the following: that the jury foreperson who smiled at at Robbie's mom went shopping, and there's a shopping area around the courthouse, to buy her daughter a birthday present. When she came back, she had to go home on the subway. She's on the subway, and this strange looking dude with a fucked up mark on his left cheek, just as the train came in, pushed her in front of the train, and she dies, and she's killed. And Michael finds out about it and realizes what they had been talking to him about, in terms of, he goes to the christening, and christening is in part 3, the first part of it, and he's despondent because he believes that he caused the death of this particular woman. So that is how we set up, the idea that no, there are no regard to the devil. There's always going to be a problem. And part 3 and part 4 are other cases, and there's all sorts of machinations. And maybe if you have me back, we'll talk about 3 and 4.
Absolutely.
So I really believe, Tom, as I said before, that the book is worthwhile, because if you're a true crime fan, the cases are true crimes. If you're a novel, you like novels, well, I've got, the kind of fantasy in there, which I call this, by the way, I call it a true crime fantasy. And I think it's, I have gotten very, very good reviews from anybody who's read the book, and from people who I don't know. So
and I've given it as well. I think it's the best work.
You have. So Fallen Angel is the name of the book. I encourage your listeners and viewers to go get it. And while I'm at it, I'm going to plug one more book, and that is the one before this, which was Homicide Is My Business. So if you're really a true crime fan, right, that's a book about a Sicilian hitman who comes to Brooklyn and has one of the most colorful and strangest lives as a mafia hitman that you could ever imagine. And
Luigi the Zip.
Yep, Luigi the Zip. And one little thing, I don't know if I mentioned this to you the last time we talked about Fallen Angel. I have since optioned the book.
Oh yeah.
There is a writer and a producer attached. The pilot for the premiere episode has been written. And this guy is a guy that's worked on television before. He's written and produced for Mayans, which is an offshoot of the Sons of Anarchy series. He's also written and produced for The Sinner, which is which has been an anthology series with a detective. and he loves the idea of this supernatural aspect to this thing, and the pilot is a little darker than Fallen Angel, but it's really well worthwhile. And he's got a different way to differentiate regular people from the devil. And I'm not going to tell your folks about it at this point, but instead of the mark on the left cheek, he's got another way for designating who the devil is in his pilot. And so the problem is, and this is where I was getting to, is that everything was going great. We had it all done. We're ready to take it out to the marketplace. The writers go on strike in Hollywood, and nothing is getting done. Nothing. In fact, I also optioned Friends of the Family, which is the first book that I did involving the mafia cops, two detectives on the mob payroll. That's been optioned, and the people behind that are is one of the guys from I don't know if your folks or you ever watched the Americans, which was a terrific series on FX. The one of the guys that one of the stars of that show was an FBI agent who was their next door neighbor, who they were trying to always keep away from their activities. His name is Noah Emmerich, and he's been in a lot of shows. He's attached to the Friends of the Family. He and his brother was the head of Warner Brothers, and now the head of Warner Brothers Television. So once again, optioned it, ready to go out and get directors, and they were going to interview actors, all on hold until the writer's strike is over in Hollywood. So anyway, that's story of my life.
That's
story of my life.
That's so infuriating, but
yeah,
is what it is. But
so,
I was gonna say, guys, go into the description, grab the book, Fallen Angel, grab Homicide is My Business, Crooked Brooklyn, Friends of the Family, or Behind the Murder Curtain. And Mike, shoot me a text, and just so I can remember to schedule you, so I don't let so much time go by next time.
I will do that, Tom. Thank you again for having me.
Absolutely, dude. Love having you on. Thank you for coming on, man. And
yeah. And you'll send me a link, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Of this?
I'll email you the Rumble link and the Spotify link.
Good. Okay.
All right, brother. Mike Vecchione, thank you so much, sir. Guys, please go into the description. Please go grab the book. Please go support Mike. Leave a good review. Till next time, Mr. Vecchione. Thank you so much for your time. As always, where the hell is the mouse, Christian? There it is. I don't have my glasses on.